The presidential sweepstakes kicks into high gear with the first GOP debate. Can anyone outshine the Donald? And the fifth undercover Planned Parenthood video suggests the organization is selling fetal parts. Yet Congress failed to defund the group this week. Author and radio talk show host Laura Ingraham joins us to discuss it all. And later, the UN has approved sustainable development goals for the next 15 years. Congressman Chris Smith joins me exclusively to discuss disturbing details buried in the goals that you have yet to hear about, and the unlikely nation-state supporting them. A don't-miss segment. And finally, a special look at the spiritual home for generations of Broadway's finest. We'll take you to St. Malachy's, the Actors Chapel in Manhattan. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. So much news to share. Laura Ingraham and Chris Smith are straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show or if you have a question, I'll be tweeting live throughout. Find me on Twitter at Raymond Arroyo, or you can email me at worldover@EWTN.com. Here's the brief news from the world over this week. The Holy See says stopping climate change is integral to helping the poor and encouraging authentic human development. Vatican envoy to the United Nations, Archbishop Bernardito Auza, told the UN Security Council that environmental care and alleviating poverty are not separate challenges, but parts of one in the same. The Archbishop proposed that the world sign on to the global climate change agreement in Paris later this year. He urged more funds to tackle the issue, and he encouraged richer countries to provide green energy technology to the billions of people in needy countries. More on the United Nations, the Holy See, and the unseen agenda behind the UN's Sustainable Development Goals later in the show. In a related story, the head of the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Domestic Justice and Human Development is applauding President Barack Obama's new carbon emission limits on the nation's power plants. Miami Archbishop Thomas Wensky said the new regulations are an important step forward to protect the health of all people, especially children, the elderly, the poor, and the vulnerable. The aim of the revised Clean Power Plan is to cut greenhouse gas emissions from U.S. power plants by nearly a third within 15 years. And the shocking Planned Parenthood expose continues as the Center for Medical Progress released another undercover video this week. In the fifth video, the research director of Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast in Houston, Texas, discusses the altering of abortion procedures to permit the delivery of a baby with intact organs, likely a violation of the state's late-term abortion laws. Despite repeated Planned Parenthood denials of profiting from transferring fetal body parts, Melissa Farrell in the video explains just how important fetal tissue is to Planned Parenthood's revenue streams. Cardinal Timothy Dolan of New York said, quote, "For once, we can actually take Planned Parenthood at their word. They don't use euphemisms, but instead openly acknowledge the humanity of the babies they're aborting and are now dissecting." The horrifying videos did little to persuade Senate Democrats to defund the abortion giant. On Capitol Hill this week, all but 2 Democrats voted against defunding Planned Parenthood. The defunding bill went down to defeat. In Louisiana, Governor and presidential candidate Bobby Jindal cut off his state's Planned Parenthood funding through its Medicaid contract. On Monday, Jindal said Planned Parenthood does not represent the values of the people of Louisiana and shows a fundamental disrespect for human life. Governor Jindal further noted there are other community-based groups that can provide women's health services without the baggage that Planned Parenthood brings. In light of the recent videos, Louisiana has begun an investigation of Planned Parenthood. Jindal has also called on the FBI to assist. More on this story later in the show. And in China, Christians are uniting in protest against the communist regime's removal of crosses from church buildings in the Zhejiang province. A group of a dozen Catholics recently wept and sang hymns as they watched government workers use a blowtorch to cut a steel cross off the top of their church. Local Christians are under a 2-month deadline to remove crosses from the spires, roofs, and arches of an estimated 4,000 churches. Backlash against the communist government's efforts has come from even China's officially sanctioned churches, Protestant and Catholic alike. They warn that the regime's continued efforts to eradicate crosses could turn the faithful against party rule. Meanwhile, Asia News is reporting that 4 underground priests in northeastern China were arrested and have been denied water and food for not joining the communist-run Catholic Patriotic Association. Authorities are attempting to coerce the priests to join the officially sanctioned Catholic Church in China, but the priests have adamantly refused. And amid these continuing sanctions and tensions, for the first time in 3 years, a Catholic bishop has been ordained in China with the approval of both Beijing and the Holy See. Under heavy security on August 4th, Bishop Joseph Zhang Yinlin was ordained an auxiliary bishop in the Henan province. The last bishop ordained with joint Chinese-Vatican approval announced at his ordination in 2012 that he would not be loyal to the communist-backed Patriotic Association. Shanghai Bishop Thaddeus Ma Daquin was taken into custody and remains under house arrest to this day. In a related story, Beijing announced this week that it intends to name the successor to the Dalai Lama, the spiritual leader of Tibet. The Politburo says that since China assumed control of Tibet, confirmation of the next Dalai Lama is the role of the Chinese government, which deems the process a matter of sovereignty and national security. And Pope Francis is calling for the Church to be more welcoming toward divorced Catholics who have remarried, even if there are no, quote, simple solutions. In his Wednesday audience remarks, the Pope echoed statements of his predecessors, saying that the Church must reach out to these Catholics and their children. He added that though the Church cannot approve of their irregular marriages, baptized Catholics in this situation are, quote, not excommunicated by any means and should not be treated as such. Pope Francis made no mention of the upcoming Synod of Bishops on the Family, which is expected to discuss the matter of Holy Communion for divorced and remarried Catholics when it meets in October. And when we return, which GOP presidential candidate stands the best chance of challenging Trump? And some are saying the undercover Planned Parenthood video released this week is the worst yet. We'll show it to you when radio talk show host and LifeZet founder Laura Ingraham joins us when The World Over continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. With the first GOP debate, the campaign for president kicks into high gear. Trump is still leading in the polls, but who is best poised to challenge him? Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton have been exchanging jabs all week, while an effort to defund Planned Parenthood flamed out on Capitol Hill. To talk about it all, a woman with her finger on the pulse of the nation, radio talk show host and founder of the new website, LifeZet, Laura Ingraham.
How are you?
Great to see you. Thank you for coming back.
You're welcome.
I want to get right to Donald Trump. He's been leading in the polls, and even though he is the front runner, Trump told Fox Jeb Bush has a problem. He's jabbing at Jeb. Watch this.
He's very weak on immigration. I mean, he's very, very weak. I mean, it's going to be a porous border. It's going to be more like we have right now, which takes away jobs, which has tremendous security problems. And I think he has to get tough on immigration.
Why is he cutting through, and why this emphasis on immigration? Is this part of his appeal?
No, I think it's a big part of his appeal. The establishment in the GOP, kind of the more business corporatist wing of the GOP, has been hungering for a more liberalized immigration process in this country, not only to not crack down on illegal immigration, Raymond, but to bring more foreign workers, and not just 1,000 here, 1,000 there, but tens of millions of new foreign workers into the country over the next 10, 15 years. Trump hasn't talked as much about that, but he hits the easier issue, I think, which does go to the heart of the issue, which is why does the most powerful nation on the earth cannot control its border? And his point is there's not a will to control the border because business wants these cheap laborers. So very few people are talking about it with the panache and the kind of brash approach as Trump. And he's an entertainer. He gets it. He gets the feeling of a stage. And I think he's doing what Jeb Bush, just for at least right now, doesn't seem to be able to do, which is to dominate a stage and brand a campaign.
Yeah. He has the mien of a leader. He's got the bravado.
Yeah.
He comes in. He's unafraid to say what's on his mind.
And Giuliani said today, or yesterday, I guess today, that he has a little Reagan in him. But that's coming from Giuliani. Now, they're all old pals, right? But you're going to have to get a lot more specific than, well, he's terrible on the border. Bush is a disaster.
Yeah.
There is going to come a time where, just like every other candidate, he's going to have to give a serious economic speech. He's going to have to give a serious speech on immigration. He's going to have to deal with the issue of all these foreign workers.
Are you surprised he's gotten this far without giving a policy speech?
Not really, because he's striking a tone and going right to the heart of the old Bush ways that a lot of these other candidates, Raymond, are afraid to do, I think.
Okay, you brought up Jeb Bush. During the GOP candidates' Voter First Forum on Monday in New Hampshire, Jeb Bush was asked about the shadow cast by his brother and his father. This is what he said.
So I have a different view than my brother. My dad is probably the most perfect man alive, so it's very hard for me to be critical of him. In fact, I got a T-shirt that says, at the Jeb swag store, that says, my dad's the greatest man alive. If you don't like it, I'll take you outside.
What do you see there?
It's a real vulnerability for Jeb, and it's there for any candidate who wants to exploit it, and any candidate in the GOP field who isn't afraid of taking on the Bushes. Now, so far, the only one who's not really doesn't seem to be afraid at all of taking on the Bushes is Donald Trump. Now, is there any coincidence that Donald Trump is up 12 points in the polls against Jeb in a couple of states and nationally leading every poll? I think the country, the country, GOP, grassroots, regular workaday people who vote, a lot of independents, they don't doubt that the Bushes are good people or that they don't not respect their service to the country. Of course they do. But that was a different time. And today, I think a lot of people think we need a new kind of leader. We've tried these old policies. We've tried these old consultants. We've tried these old White House staffers. And a lot of them are going to be the same people, are working for Jeb right now, are the same people who worked both for his father, who was defeated by Clinton, and for his brother, who went out with 27% approval rating, who'd helped deliver us Barack Obama. Now, I guess we could go just relitigate the 2000s again, if that's what the Republicans want to do, because Hillary is going to be a lot tougher than any of these other questions that were asked. But I don't think that's really what the Republican voters want. I think they want a new way forward. And unless Jeb is really going to tell us, my brother was wrong on this, he didn't do this right, this part of Iraq was wrong, and really separates himself, I just don't see he's going to do that. He hasn't done it so far.
See, the tonal thing, I think the performance is probably more of a problem here than I even think the shadow cast by the brother or the
Yeah, well, but saying he's going to call his mother and he's going to talk to his mother, I mean, he's a 64-year-old man. I mean, it is true his mother is probably the most popular Bush. She's a hilarious, great lady.
He said on a video this week he prepares for the debate by calling his mother and asking her what he should say.
And so I'm thinking that's kind of cute, but that line's getting a little old. And if he thinks Hillary Clinton's going to just go, ha, 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 that stuff, Hillary Clinton's going to go right at the heart of the Bush agenda.
Well, we're going to get to that in a moment. And they had a sparring match this week over Planned Parenthood. I got to get to this video. The 5th undercover Planned Parenthood video by the Center for Medical Progress was released this week. In it, Melissa Farrell, the director of research for Planned Parenthood Gulf Coast, discusses the relationship between altering abortion procedures to get the most intact organs possible and the profit to be gleaned from it. Listen.
Yeah, and so if we alter our process and we are able to obtain intact fetal cadavers, then we can make it part of the budget that any dissections are this, and splitting the specimens into different shipments is this. I mean, it's all just a matter of line items.
This is grisly stuff. I mean, it's amazing to hear someone talking so cavalierly about human life. After last week, we saw the video of people picking through Petri dishes, but it doesn't seem to be having an effect on Capitol Hill. They could not defund federal funding of Planned Parenthood, Laura.
Getting back to why the country is really feels like we've lost our way, that America is not the country we grew up in, and they want to be optimistic, but then they see these crazy, evil, barbaric things happening, and there's a collective yawn from the White House. I mean, the White House is basically saying, we haven't watched the videos. We haven't watched the videos, but apparently they're opening up an investigation about Cecil the lion in Africa.
In Zimbabwe.
In Zimbabwe, who was murdered. So murdering a lion, okay, we can debate about that. I mean, I'm a lion lover, so I wouldn't be in favor of that. But the cognitive dissonance on all of this and the purposeful refusal to watch tells you they even know how barbaric it is. They know, Raymond. They can't confront it because it's like that old game Kerplunk. Remember? Anyone remember that from the 70s?
Yeah,
and you pull the sticks out, the marbles are on top, and you pull that one out, the whole thing comes down. Admitting the barbarity of what they're doing is to admit the barbarity of what they always do and what they have been doing at Planned Parenthood. So Jeb Bush kind of botches his answer to that. Again, another thing that he botched.
Yeah, we're going to get to it.
Yeah,
In fact, I want to roll this for people. Don't get ahead. Don't get ahead of me. The presidential contenders have come out for and against Planned Parenthood. Here are, as Laura presaged, the remarks by Jeb Bush when asked if the organization should be defunded and Hillary Clinton's response to Jeb. Listen.
We should, and the next president should defund Planned Parenthood. I'm not sure we need $500 million for women's health issues. But if you took dollar for dollar, there are many extraordinarily fine organizations, community health organizations that exist, federally sponsored community health organizations to provide quality care for women on a wide variety of health issues. But abortion should not be funded by the government.
Jeb Bush said he's not sure we need $500 million for women's health issues. I'm reading it because I want to quote it exactly. Now, he's got no problem giving billions of dollars away to super wealthy and powerful corporations, but I guess women's health just isn't a priority for him. When you attack Planned Parenthood, you attack women's health.
It'd be fun at that point. Wouldn't you just beg at that point for Jeb to say something like, well, Mrs. Clinton, considering how much money your foundation received from Islamic countries that do the most horrifying things to living women, adult women, child brides, sacrifice, the horrible things that we know the Islamic world has done to women, that money seems to cash pretty well. Those checks cash, right? I mean, look, Jeb.
He did issue a clarification on Facebook later
I don't
saying...
want to make too much of this, but I think there is a bit of a pattern here. And for any of the big donors who are watching this program tonight, at some point you have to make a calculation. Is he really the best horse to bet on? If you're one of these, multimillionaire guys, and everyone's hitting you up, and you've written a check to Jeb, and then you see he botched the Iraq War question 4 times. Took him the 4th to clarify. He couldn't answer that question. He had a bungled rollout of his book tour. He really kind of misspoke here, and he had to clarify it. You kind of want a guy who just can answer the question straight, forthrightly, with passion, who doesn't have to keep issuing follow-up corrections, clarifications. Or you need a guy who says, you know something, this game of catching you on a phrase is stupid. It's an evil organization. I'm going to defund it. And however I phrased it, guess what? Everyone phrases things differently. But, he either has to go after the premise that he made a mistake, or he has to know enough not to say something that's going to get him in trouble.
I want to play Chris Christie for you. He was one of the many candidates. Rand Paul, Ben Carson, so many came out calling for the defunding of Planned Parenthood. This is Chris Christie, his video response to Hillary Clinton. Watch.
Now, you see, the real issue here that Secretary Clinton won't address is the conduct of Planned Parenthood. My position on this is clear. We defunded Planned Parenthood in New Jersey nearly 6 years ago, and I've viewed it 7 times since then. I don't believe taxpayer money should be going to Planned Parenthood. Now, Secretary Clinton, why don't you answer this question? Do you support the conduct of Planned Parenthood in the killing of children in the womb in a way that maximizes their body parts for sale on the open market? Secretary Clinton, answer that question. I just did.
What do you make of that?
Chris Christie turned the table on Hillary and in part on the rest of the Republicans, who a lot of them have good track records on this. But I think the point that, again, that we see with someone like a Christie, and we'll see others emerge, he has that natural ability to kind of turn a question around. Reagan had it.
He's unafraid of the media.
He's not afraid. He's been through this media spotlight. Some people like him, some people don't. But he's walked through that fire of the New York media market, and they're always on his case. So he kind of knows how to maneuver in these. And I think, look, he was elected as a social conservative. He was elected as an economic conservative, not one, but 2 times by significant margins in a Democratic state. Now, his approval numbers aren't where they need to be, but he was elected in a blue state by significant margins, blew away the gender gap, got a record number of minorities voting for him, and he ran as a social conservative.
Okay, let me ask you this question before we move on to your latest venture. You see all of these candidates, what are we up to now, 17?
Yeah.
Who is in position to realize, I think, the aspirations that people have for their candidate, and that's why you see the gravitation toward Donald Trump. Trump does not have the policy expertise, and he probably won't get there. Is there any other person who marries both the forthright enunciation of these principles and yet has a policy and some proven track
I think
record?
you have overlooked Jim Gilmore and George Pataki, who are both.
Yes.
Oh, come on.
Governor Pataki was on my show a few weeks ago. So.
I didn't know they were running until tonight. So, no.
Be nice.
I'm just teasing. You never know what can happen, right? And you never know who can build. But it's only a few people, in my mind, who have a pathway to the nomination. Because money does matter. It matters in big markets like Florida and New Hampshire. It matters in Ohio. So I'd watch Kasich. I'd watch him closely. I'd keep an eye on Christie. I mean, everyone says he's done. I don't know about that. He's a fighter. He has an ethnic background. He's that Italian mother still urging him on, I think. And so I think Christie, I would say someone like a Rubio is a dark horse at this point because I still think he exists in Jeb's shadow. Jeb Bush, I think, is just going to have a hard time. And maybe it's not fair because it's his last name. Maybe it's just none of it's fair, but he's going to have a hard time.
Hillary Clinton's having a hard time, too.
Right. She has her own problems. I'm just talking about the Republican field. I think I'd look at Scott Walker, John Kasich, and Chris Christie. Those 3.
You think those are the 3 who could emerge?
Those are the 3. I think Jeb Bush is Jeb Bush. I mean, he's going to have the most money, and he's going to have all the same consultants and policy experts that his brother had, and his brother did win 2 elections. So we'll see.
Recently launched a new website. I know this is an endeavor close and dear to your heart.
Yes.
Called LifeZet. Tell people about it.
LifeZet is a lifestyle site for the rest of us. So we tackle faith and FaithZet. Raymond, I want you to give us your opinion on that. But FaithZet and MomZet for all the moms watching and parents. And we do cool stuff, and it's HealthZet, and politics is a small part of it, but it's mostly just our lives and the things that matter in our lives. And it's, for the most part, not politics. You know, when I travel around the country and I meet a lot of your fans, Raymond, most people are just dealing with, I have an aging parent, I'm struggling, I'm trying to get the right care for a mom or dad, or my son has gone off to college, he seems to have lost his values, lost his faith, what do I do? Those are the things that people are dealing with.
So it's kind of very practical articles in addition to news.
Practical advice, cutting-edge commentary, and a lot of humor. We have great video. We have a great team of people all across the country, so I'm looking forward to having a lot of EWTN viewers tune in and check out lifezet.com. They'll like it.
I'm sure they will. Laura
Great to see you.
On the radio every day of the week. Check her out. And don't forget Laura's latest venture, where you'll find life explained, from parenting to health to pop culture to politics. lifezet.com. When we come back, we'll explore the UN Sustainable Development Goals and why there is cause for concern in the language being used regarding reproductive health rights. Congressman Chris Smith joins us when The World Over Live continues. Stay right there. Thank you again.
This is truly a we the people's agenda. The outcome document is called, quote, Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And it is a roadmap to ending global poverty, building a life of dignity for all, and leaving no one behind.
That was Ban Ki-moon, Secretary General of the United Nations, commenting on the General Assembly's endorsement of these development goals. They'll be adopted in September and will remain in place until 2030. Welcome back to The World Over. While the Sustainable Development Goals target poverty and address climate change, my next guest says there's another agenda no one is talking about. He claims the soon-to-be-approved UN goals will bring abortion on demand to developing countries around the globe. And an unexpected nation-state is now supporting the goals. Congressman Chris Smith, the co-chair of the House Pro-Life Caucus, joined us earlier for this explosive exclusive. Watch. The UN is prepared to pass these 15-year development goals. Why should anyone care what the UN does or decides? How does that impact us? I'm sure that's what most of the people at home are thinking.
You know, to most of the world, especially the developing world, the UN is almost like a life or death situation for them. The funding that comes, if they have refugees, they need refugee money. And for the developing world, the UN is almost like another government, if not a major government for them. You know,
this is truly
these goals, which will begin January 1st and the year 2030. In mid to a latter part of September, all of the heads of state, prime ministers, presidents will convene in New York, and they will celebrate the launch of these goals. And here's some of the things they're going to say. It's a call to action to change our world. The goals are the agenda for global action over the next 15 years. They also say that no one must be left behind. And the big problem is an entire segment of humanity, unborn children, are left behind, left out, and put at grave risk of abortion on demand through the promotion of abortion that's embedded in the language of this.
Let's talk up. We're going to put on screen two of these targets that are particularly problematic and that you've identified as real challenges here. Target 3.7. It says by 2030, ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health care services, including for family planning, information and education, and the integration of reproductive health into national strategies and programs. That means what?
Well, that means that it's not defined, but it is defined. It's just like here when people talk about choice, freedom of choice, reproductive rights. It has plain meaning in the NGO community, the non-governmental organizations, and especially plain meaning in the UN bureaucracy. The WHO put out this massive call to action on abortion and sexual issues. And here's what they said. Sexual health today encompasses access to abortion. Planned Parenthood said there is good news as there is Target, this is International Planned Parenthood Federation based in London, the big one. There is good news as there is a target for sexual and reproductive health under the health goal and reproductive rights under the gender goal. Planned Parenthood is the largest purveyor of abortion globally. In our country, they've done well over 7 million abortions, 230,000 every year. And we all know the latest outrage, the latest scandal, where they're crushing babies in a way that procures intact organs for sale and marketing, trafficking in baby body parts. This organization, all the treaty bodies at the UN, like even the Convention on the Rights of the Child Implementation Committee, they went after the Vatican and said they have to change canon law to include abortion. They've recently gone after Spain and said that where there's a parental notification effort, because they're trying to do that, that's called a barrier, and that's what WHO and UN Population Fund, all these alphabet soup agencies, they are surging every day of the week. They've hijacked, frankly, the development agenda, because there are a lot of things in the goals, Raymond, that are good. Eradicate poverty, global hunger. There even has a trafficking section or mention. I wrote the trafficking laws for the United States of America, the landmark law in the year 2000. I take a backseat to no one. It is the law. It is prevention, prosecution, and protection, the 3 Ps of trafficking. There's a mention of it here. But again, the abortion piece is integrated.
It's woven into the whole thing.
And it's woven in, and as you said, you know, these goals also make the point that it needs to be integrated into the national programs. The health has to all be incorporated. I don't know how the Pope when he speaks at the UN, can in any way endorse these goals without a major section in his speech where he says this is unacceptable.
Well, I want to get to that in a moment because there's more on that thread. But let's go to this other target. I want you to explore this, and then we'll move on to who's supporting this how. Target 5.6, it says ensure universal access to sexual and reproductive health and reproductive rights as agreed in accordance with the program of action of the International Conference on Population and Development and the Beijing Platform for Action and the outcome documents of their review conferences. Now, you were in Beijing. You and I were together in Cairo.
Exactly.
There was a battle royale then to insert this language, universal access to sexual and reproductive health. The Vatican strived mightily under John Paul II to bring together South American countries, Muslim countries, to defeat it. It was stripped.
As both you and I know, without Pope, now St. John Paul II, we would have had an international right to abortion. That's what the Clinton administration was pushing. I was there. I was part of that delegation, but a very much unwanted part of it because the Republicans got to pick a few members that could go. I lobbied along with the Vatican and like-minded countries, and a huge victory was gleaned at both Beijing and before that in Cairo in 1994. The problem is that began a 20-year push every year at the review conferences to expand the language, to get more of these UN agencies and regional agencies or bodies like the African Union and others to buy into this abortion agenda. 20 years later, now we're talking about universal access. You know how that is described by the UN Population Fund? They describe that as anybody who is 15 years of age or older. WHO, World Health Organization, on a tear to promote abortion worldwide. They say that this is one of the barriers. If you have parental knowledge or consent laws in a country, that's a barrier. Waiting periods. They tell us that we have to fund it with public fundings. In their documents, this 2012 document is replete. This could have been written by Planned Parenthood. It's a World Health Organization document. So anyone who looks at this language, and especially since it says outcome documents going into the future, those meetings are often hijacked, just like this is being hijacked by the abortion community.
How could these goals, these development goals, sustainable development goals, be used against faith-based organizations, many of them that provide some of the great poverty relief and development on the ground in most of the developing countries?
Raymond, when the President Bush's PEPFAR program, which is now providing about $5 billion a year to fight and combat HIV/AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. It was Henry Hyde's bill. I'm the one who offered the amendment on the floor of the House that was passed that said that there's a conscience clause so that faith-based can participate. Under Clinton, on the smaller program for HIV/AIDS, they were precluded participation. We're seeing it now under Obama, even in the trafficking area. The USCCB, the Catholic bishops, had a great program for helping trafficking victims in the United States, foreigners who came in and needed help. They took that grant away and gave it to groups that will refer for abortion because they've integrated the whole abortion piece as integral to the whole thing. So faith-based groups like Caritas and Samaritan's Purse, Catholic Relief Services, the huge effort and fine effort, they'll be told unless you work around in some way, they'll make it very hard, but they're very likely when these grants are being meted out by governments, including the European Union, the U.S., the whole big surge to give more money to promote this agenda, they'll be left behind because they will not incorporate abortion.
Congressman Smith, both Catholic Relief Services and the Holy See mission to the UN are supporting these goals. They are on record as saying, this is the Holy See, and I quote, "We support the verbatim inclusion of the Sustainable Development Goals and targets." Those are the two targets that we just discussed. What's happening here with the Holy See and Catholic Relief Services, Frank?
I am profoundly disappointed in that language. we're in contact with the Vatican, my staff and I, and others who are concerned about this.
And what do they say?
My wife Marie, for well over a year and a half, that this type of language, it wasn't all crystallized then, but it was getting close to it, even though it doesn't use the word abortion. And Archbishop Sorondo said in an interview that, oh, see, there's no mention of abortion. Look at all of the other evidence, especially in the UN bureaucracy, that defines these concepts, reproductive rights, as meaning abortion on demand. And
reproductive health.
So we can't put our head in the sand and suggest, because the word is not explicitly mentioned, that it's not in there, and it's in there in a very powerful way. I'm very worried about what the indicators, the next shoe that will drop. There's targets, goals, 169 targets, 17 goals, and then there's these indicators that will be hundreds of them. They will be surging the abortion agenda. God willing, we can stop it somehow for the next 15 years, and whole countries will be at risk. Right now, the UN Population Fund in Malawi, in Africa, has just come out and said they're going to pay for the effort to bring down their right to life law and replace it with a pro-abortion law and provide them technical assistance in drafting the language. That's what the UNFPA has been doing all over the world, and they'll be part of the engine driving this whole agenda.
See, it doesn't make sense. It's not consistent, because you have Pope Francis saying, as he travels about the world, this is ideological colonization, is what he would call this, what he has called this. And yet, you have the Holy See signing on to these goals with no caveats, no carve-outs. They did issue this statement that said, we would oppose the imposition of targets and indicators on countries and peoples whose laws and values are contrary to them. But after you already sign on to the
targets. There's language in here that says it's called the Cairo caveat. And in the Cairo document, it said, according to national law. But they also have language in the target that says, and the outcome documents. So as the outcome documents are increasingly politicized by the abortion lobby, and they are very powerful at the UN. They don't have a constituency in a lot of other places, but they have it there. And matter of fact, since Cairo 20 years ago, incrementally, they have grown their presence in a huge way. So much so that all of these documents from World Health Organization and else, you could just put it side by side with Planned Parenthood and said they're identical. They're literally identical. And that's why I'm so concerned about the Vatican's lack of leadership when it came to saying those targets have to be significantly amended, dropped completely would be the best case, because we're going to rue the day, frankly, and we're going to be in this battle for the next 15 years to try to mitigate the damage that's being done right now.
Well, and people don't realize the UN, these UN documents are used as precedent in international law, and we've even seen them invoked in our own high court as somehow precedent setting. So they do matter. When will this finally be decided? Well, and might the Holy See be waiting to stage a floor fight at that time?
Just to give you an idea how John Paul II handled it, he had regional meetings, and I was at one of those in Peru. And he had all of these bishops, archbishops, pro-life activists throughout Latin America, all the Americas, North and South and Central, as well as lawmakers. And there was a great rallying cry for the unborn and for real development aid. To make it a long story short, all of that agenda gets hijacked by the pro-abortionists who consider an unborn child, like Planned Parenthood does, to be tissue that could be destroyed and wanted only for its utility in selling its body parts. That mindset is lethal to a generation of kids. If you want to know where this all could head, just look at China. The UN has backed the Chinese program for, I offered the First Amendment in 1984 to defund the UN Population Fund, and it passed. Bottom line is, you know, population control is a major part of what's included in here, but the abortion part is the one that I think we all have to be deeply concerned about. And every country in the world now, particularly pro-life countries, have to be on guard because this surge could be overwhelming. And when it's linked to funding, and faith-based groups now are disqualified from getting funded because they refuse to capitulate, it really will be a serious outcome for the next 15 years. So, but mid-September, latter part of September, when the heads of state make their statements, we already know what they'll proclaim, that this historic document is transformative. This is where we're going now for the next 15 years.
Congressman Chris Smith, thanks for being
Raymond,
here.
thank you.
Talk to you soon. We will continue to monitor the goals for sustainable development. Up next, a special look at St. Malachy's Church in the heart of Broadway's Theater District and the mission that continues even after the curtains fall. When the World Over Live continues. Stay right there.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. You regular viewers of the show know that we occasionally bring you musical performances or interviews from St. Malachy's, the Actors Chapel in the heart of New York's Theater District. But we've never looked at the amazing history and the ongoing mission of the church itself. Tonight, we rectify that. As the longtime pastor, Father Richard Baker, who's run St. Malachy's since 2003, moves on to a new assignment, here's a look at the important work and contribution of the little parish that's been getting standing ovations for decades. It's a half hour before curtain on Broadway. Actors race to their stage doors, patrons press into theaters to claim their tickets, and in the heart of the Theater District on 49th Street, the bells of St. Malachy's, the Actors Chapel, fill the Great White Way. The bells were installed by the then pastor, Father George Moore, in the 1970s, at a time when these streets were filled with drug dealers and prostitutes. Father Richard Baker is the current pastor of St. Malachy's.
Well, Father Moore put a carillon in and rang that as a sign that of who we are as the Actors Chapel. But he rang those bells to tell the prostitutes, the drug dealers, and everybody, we're staying, you're going. The bells were the sound of revival for Father Moore. They had died for many years after he had died. I restored, the first thing I got here was to restore the bells so that they would sing again.
This church, better known as the Actors Chapel, has been singing for more than a century. The only Catholic church in the middle of New York's Theater District, it has become a spiritual refuge for stagehands, actors, musicians, technicians, and visitors alike.
It is amazing when you come in here and you've had that experience where you come in and you meet so-and-so who's about to open up a show, and she comes and says, I won't say her name, I've come to speak to my Jewish sister. And she lights candles, to those who, like a Mario Lopez, who is a good friend of ours and doesn't mind me saying his name, who comes and has his devotion to our Lord and worship with us. It's a beautiful thing, but remember, they are the small part of the acting community. The 96% of those that may not have their names out are as equally strong and powerful, and their witness is as amazing as those that everybody would like to see with the names.
Enrique Segura has been in The Lion King on Broadway for more than a decade. A St. Malachy's parishioner, he appreciates the role the church plays in the community.
There's a lot of different people in the theater, a lot of people of different faiths, and the fact that there is a Catholic-based church organization that not only caters but supports the Catholic community, who are performers, who are artists, who are musicians, who are technicians. It's not only actors, it's everyone in show business here in the heart of New York on Broadway.
Since the 1920s, St. Malachy's has been the spiritual home to some of the great luminaries of the past. Rosalind Russell, Bob and Dolores Hope, Danny Thomas, George M. Cohan, Perry Como, Chita Rivera, and Antonio Banderas all worshipped at the Actors Chapel. Tell me about the history of this place. Jimmy Durante was a altar boy here, Donna Michi. I mean, it has a storied history. Joan Crawford and Douglas Fairbanks were married here. Tell me about that connection to this golden age, if you will, of theater and screen.
Well, I think, that golden age of that was a time when those who were Catholic saw, wow, there's something special for us. This is our church. And so no matter where they lived, they would come here for their sacraments. Even if they weren't Catholic, they knew they could come here. And so we even have prominent Jewish actors and musicians that made a special home and connection here. And I think that's the beauty of Catholicism. And I think that that's hopefully what we're communicating today, that this is yours, and we have gone that extra mile to say we're here for you, even though this is out of the ordinary.
The arts community has long been a part of the mission at St. Malachy's. There's a side chapel dedicated to St. Genesius, the patron saint of actors, St. Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, and St. Cecilia, the patron saint of music. And plans are underway to erect a shrine to Archbishop Fulton Sheen, a TV pioneer on the road to sainthood.
He's the only priest with an Emmy, and his family has agreed to allow us to have the Emmy here on display in a shrine that we're erecting to him. So anybody out there who wants to help us with that, please.
Everyone brings their talents to St. Malachy's, including the pastor. His musical training led Father Baker to revive the choir at St. Malachy's, install an historic organ, and institute regular music recitals that draw new visitors to the church.
We do not use music here for music's sake. We use it because of its power, and that's the greatest failure in worship across the board, is that we use it because it sounds nice to our ear. It sounds nice, yes, of course, that's the secondary. But what's first and foremost is here that we use music so that the word can be more profoundly proclaimed, and that the truth that is contained in that word will hopefully be more profoundly experienced.
The St. Malachy's experience extends long into the night, particularly Saturday nights for those in the theater community. It's 10:30. The final curtain has fallen on most of the Broadway shows. Saturday is a two-show day for those on Broadway. And then on Sunday, a matinee awaits. As many of his peers head home or to a late dinner, Enrique runs to catch the 11 p.m. Mass at the Actors Chapel.
As a performer, we do 8 shows a week, and to be completely honest, Sunday morning is a little difficult. So what ends up happening a lot of times is you fluff off. You go, you know what? I'm not going to go this morning. I'll go next morning. And before you know it, 6 months go by and you don't go to church. So what St. Malachy's has provided here for people like me in a crazy schedule is not only is there Mass on Saturday night at 11 o'clock, there's also one on Saturday between shows at 5:30, and of course several Masses on Sunday. And it works out great for the people who are in show business, because to be honest with you, at that point there's really no excuse not to go to Mass.
For decades, there was no late Mass at St. Malachy's. Father Baker revived the tradition.
It was the stagehands that came to me specifically and said, can we have our midnight Mass back? And so they were like, you know, realistically, really 11 p.m. would really work better. Is that okay? And I said, sure, if that be God's will, and let's do it. And the first Saturday we had it, I thought, okay, maybe those 5 would be here. Well, we had about 65 people the first Mass, and it's been growing and growing, actually. I'm quite amazed that it's become popular among the parishioners as well as the theatrical community.
The late night Mass is a gift to many performers, like Luke Manikas. He's not only in Pippin on Broadway, but an altar server at St. Malachy's.
Since I have such a long commute from where I live in New Jersey, it's hard, like I can wake up early, but since it's a weekend, I don't want to wake up early on Sundays. So after the show, we just come to St. Malachy's, have church, and leave.
As the crowds of Broadway disperse, in a small church on 49th Street, one audience remains, to hear words that shall not pass and to receive the communion of saints. It may not burn as garishly as the marquees of Broadway, but the light and hope spread by St. Malachy's where it is needed most is obvious.
We're right here in the middle of it all. As I just look at my front yard, it's chaos. And the center of the world. It's the crossroads of the world.
Let's go on with the show.
A special thanks to Father Baker and his staff for their hospitality over many years. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. The links are at RaymondArroyo.com. And you can sign up for my free e-blast. You'll get information you won't find anywhere else. Now, don't miss next week. We'll have interviews with Republican presidential contenders Governor Bobby Jindal and Senator Rand Paul. Until then, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thanks for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. Bye now.